Got into the newsroom, Louisville Metro Police arrested a man telling us that they have evidence that he killed his mother, Tracy Kenemore.
Every morning, Tracy Kenemore put on her uniform and stepped into traffic so children could cross the street safely. For more than 20 years, she stood between danger and everyone else. But on December 16th, 2020, Tracy didn't make it to work. Police were called to a quiet home on Cane Run Road in Louisville. Inside, they found the 55-year-old traffic control officer dead. The woman known for her smile, her style, and her love for her kids was gone. At first, nothing made sense. Then officers noticed something small but disturbing. Tracy's car was missing. Not long after, that car was found on the road, being driven by someone who knew her better than anyone else, someone who had lived with her, someone who called her Mom. What happened inside that house would leave her co-workers stunned and a family forever broken. And what happened after the arrest would raise even more questions about violence, control, and warning signs people often miss. Stay with us. This story doesn't end where you think it does. If you're new here, subscribe now, because the truth matters, and Tracy's story deserves to be told. Tracy Kenemore was more than a name in a police report. She was a familiar face in Louisville, someone people trusted without question. At 55 years old, Tracy had spent over 21 years working with the Louisville Metro Police Department as a traffic control officer. Her job placed her on busy roads, school crossings, and intersections where patience and care mattered every single day. Parents waved to her. Children recognized her. Drivers slowed down because they knew she was there. Former LMPD Lieutenant Douglas Sweeney described Tracy as someone who truly loved her job. He said she was always smiling, always put together, and always showed up with pride. Her hair was done, her makeup neat, and her uniform worn with confidence. But more than her appearance, it was her personality that stayed with people. She was outgoing, warm, kind, and above all, she cared deeply about her children. Tracy wasn't the type of person who worked for attention. Her role wasn't glamorous, but it was important. Every shift meant standing between fast-moving cars and vulnerable lives. It meant responsibility. It meant trust. For more than 2 decades, Tracy showed up, rain or shine, morning after morning. To her co-workers, she was dependable. To the community, she was familiar. To her family, she was a mother. No one who knew Tracy imagined her life would end inside her own home. And no one imagined the person responsible would come from the place she loved most. In the next part, we'll look closer at Tracy's home life and the relationship that would later sit at the center of this case. If you're watching right now, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if stories like this matter to you, make sure you're subscribed. Behind the uniform and the daily routine, Tracy Kenemore was first a mother. Those who knew her said her children were important to her. She worked long hours, but her role at home never stopped. Like many parents, Tracy balanced responsibility, care, and concern for her family while managing the demands of her job. Tracy lived in a home on Cane Run Road in Louisville, a place that appeared quiet from the outside. It was there that she shared space with her adult son, Kendrick Lamar Kenemore. Not much about their private life was publicly known, and investigators were careful not to speculate beyond the facts. What is clear is that this was not a stranger crime. This was a case that involved family, people connected by blood and years of shared history. Living with an adult child can bring challenges. Different schedules, different expectations, different pressures. For many families, those issues are handled quietly, behind closed doors. Friends and co-workers rarely see what happens at home, especially when someone works hard to keep life moving forward. To those around her, Tracy showed strength and pride. She didn't bring personal struggles to work. She didn't ask for sympathy. She showed up. I did her job and went home. There were no public warnings, no reports that raised alarms, no signs that suggested her life was in danger. That is what made what happened next so difficult to understand. On December 16th, 2020, something inside that home went terribly wrong, and by the time police arrived, Tracy Kenemore could no longer speak for herself. If this story is making you reflect on family dynamics or situations you've seen before, share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. And don't forget to stay subscribed as we continue. On December 16th, 2020, Louisville Metro Police received a call that immediately raised concern. The report was simple but serious. A person was down inside a home on the 4400 block of Cane Run Road near Kristen Way. When officers arrived, they entered a house that should have been familiar and safe. Instead, they found Tracy Kenemore, 55 years old, unresponsive. The woman who had spent decades protecting others was lying inside her own home. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Very quickly, investigators realized this was not a natural death. The coroner later confirmed that Tracy died from blunt force trauma. The injuries were severe enough to leave no doubt that violence had taken place. News of her death spread fast. Tracy wasn't just any resident. She was a longtime employee of the Louisville Metro Police Department. For more than 21 years, she had worked alongside officers, controlling traffic and guarding school crossings. Many of the first responders knew exactly who she was. That made the scene even harder to process. As police worked inside the home, they began documenting everything: the layout, the condition of the rooms, any signs of a struggle. They also started asking a critical question: who was the last person to see Tracy alive? As officers continued their work, they noticed something that didn't add up. Tracy's car was gone. At first, it may have seemed like a small detail, but in cases like this, small details can matter more than anything else. Investigators put out information about the missing vehicle, hoping it would lead them to answers. It didn't take long. Police soon located the car, and behind the wheel was Kendrick Lamar Kenemore, Tracy's own son. He was questioned by officers. At that time, he was not immediately charged and was released. But the investigation did not stop there, because what police found next would quietly shift this case in a completely different direction. If you're finding this story important, take a moment to subscribe and stay with us. We're just getting into the heart of this case. When police first questioned Kendrick Lamar Kenemore, they did what investigators are trained to do. They gathered information and let the process run its course. At that moment, nothing had been officially proven. Tracy's death was still being examined, and every step had to be handled carefully. But while Kendrick was released, the investigation continued quietly. Inside Tracy Kenemore's home on Cane Run Road, officers had collected physical evidence. At the same time, items connected to Kendrick were also examined. This part of the case did not move fast in public, but behind closed doors, results were coming in. The turning point came with DNA testing. According to police, new evidence from the scene and testing later showed Tracy Kenemore's DNA on Kendrick's clothing. That finding placed him in direct physical contact with his mother around the time she was killed. That result changed everything. With the medical examiner confirming Tracy died from blunt force trauma and DNA tying Kendrick to the violence, investigators moved forward. On January 16th, 1 month after Tracy's death, police arrested Kendrick Lamar Kenemore. He was charged with murder-domestic violence. For Tracy's co-workers, the arrest was hard to accept. This was not a random act by a stranger. This was a crime that happened inside a family, inside a home, and behind doors no one else could see. For the public, the shock was immediate. A mother, a son, a trusted LMPD employee. The details were painful to process. Kendrick later entered a not guilty plea in his mother's death. He was ordered held on a $500,000 cash bond as the case moved forward. At this point, many believed the violence had stopped, but it hadn't. What Kendrick would do while in custody would raise even more concern and add new charges to an already serious case. Before we move on, let me ask you this. Do you think violent behavior always shows itself early, or do some people only reveal who they are under pressure? Share your thoughts in the comments and make sure you're subscribed. The next part of this story takes an even darker turn. After his arrest, Kendrick Lamar Kenemore was taken to Louisville Metro Corrections to await the next steps in his case. He was already facing a murder charge connected to his mother's death. Many assumed that behind bars the danger had ended. So it hadn't. According to arrest records and reports later obtained by local news outlets, an incident inside the jail would add a disturbing new chapter to this case. On camera footage from inside Metro Corrections, Kendrick was seen involved in an altercation with another inmate. What started as a confrontation quickly turned physical. Records state he was seen punching and kicking the other man repeatedly. Then the situation escalated. Kendrick removed his jail-issued shirt and used it to wrap around the victim's neck, applying force until the man lost consciousness. By the time corrections officers reached the cell, Kendrick was still applying pressure. Officers had to use force to pull the shirt away and separate the two men. The victim survived, but the incident was serious enough that Kendrick was charged with attempted murder and strangulation on top of the murder charge he was already facing. For investigators and correction staff, this behavior raised serious concerns. This was not an emotional outburst during arrest. This happened while Kendrick was already in custody, already under supervision. The pattern was hard to ignore. A man accused of killing his own mother was now accused of nearly killing someone else behind bars. As these new charges were filed, the case against Kendrick grew heavier. What began as a single tragic death now pointed to ongoing violence and loss of control. And once again, the focus shifted back to Tracy Kenemore, because the question many people began asking was simple and deeply unsettling. If this violence continued in jail, what may have been happening before anyone noticed? Tracy Kenemore spent more than 2 decades doing a job most people overlook, but many depend on. Day after day, she stood in traffic so others could pass safely. She showed up with pride, with kindness, and with care for her work, her community, and her children. On December 16, 2020, that steady life ended inside the place meant to protect her most. What followed was a case that shocked co-workers, neighbors, and everyone who learned the truth. A mother was gone, a family was broken, and a son now faces charges that will define the rest of his life. As the case moved forward, the violence did not stop. The incident inside Louisville Metro Corrections added new weight to an already heavy story, raising painful questions about behavior, control, and warning signs that often stay hidden behind closed doors. But it's important to remember this. Tracy Kenemore is not just how she died. She is the woman who stood at crossings so children could get home safely. She is the co-worker remembered for her smile and pride in her work. She is the mother whose life mattered long before headlines existed. Stories like this force us to face uncomfortable truths. Harm doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it grows quietly within families. Sometimes it goes unseen until it's too late. And sometimes the people who give the most to others receive the least protection themselves. If there is one takeaway from Tracy's story, it is this: silence helps no one. Paying attention, asking questions, and taking concerns seriously can save lives, families, workplaces. And communities all have a role to play in creating safer spaces, especially when stress and conflict begin to show. Tracy Kenemore deserved safety in her own home. She deserved the same protection she gave to others for more than 21 years. And her story deserves to be remembered with care, honesty, and respect. If this case moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about how we can better protect the people around us. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so stories like Tracy's are never forgotten. Thank you for watching and for taking the time to remember her.